Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. Welcome to Brockton Online, hosted by Ephemera. Uh, so we're going to begin with the land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge that the Brockton organizers do our work on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat nations, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. We acknowledge the ways that colonization, genocide, and racism have impacted Indigenous peoples, and that settlers have a responsibility in making space at events like these for Indigenous voices. And we all share the responsibility to critically understand and challenge forces of systemic oppression. And for many of us, this includes recognition of how our ancestors as settlers have contributed to these colonial legacies with both silences and actions. And we also acknowledge that Black Lives Matter, and we will continue to feature and center Black and Indigenous voices, other people of color, and other underrepresented groups in our series. And all of this is included in our mandate. Thank you very much to Ephemera Series for hosting us on their online platform. Their next event is Wednesday, September 16th. Please check it out. Today we will feature our normal schedule, a guest speaker, a Q&A for that, 4 readers with a group Q&A for them. Each presentation will be a little bit shorter than usual, and we will skip the break. Please type your questions into the chat box. There is a bit of a lag, so please type them as they come to you.
Brockton Writers Series was founded in November of 2009, which means we've been bringing literary goodness to Toronto for over a decade. Our Brockton Writers Series volunteers are Hannah Amdemichael, Nancy K. Clark, Dorianne Emerton, Sonia Patare, and I'm Emily Sanford. We have the pleasure of working together to keep the Brockton Writers Series going. If you want to join us, please check in with one of us after the readings. You can type your comments if you like. We'd love to hear from you. We especially need a Facebook handler. If you're really good at that, please join us. We would like to acknowledge with a great deal of thanks the continued support of the Ontario Arts Council who make this series possible. Finally, our sincere thanks to you, our audience, for being here right now. On to the show. Our first speaker is our guest speaker, Elham Ali, on attracting audiences, getting the most out of digital events. So please type questions as they come to you in the chat. Because there's a bit of delay, type them sooner so that we don't have to wait around afterward, and we'll moderate them and make sure they get asked so you can hear your questions answered. Elham Ali is a writer and publishing professional based in Toronto. She graduated from the University of Toronto in 2014, and since completing the Humber College Publishing Program in 2015, she has worked in marketing and publicity at Canada's Ballet Jurgen, Penguin Random House Canada, and Dundurn Press. Elham, welcome.
Thank you all so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I'd like to say thank you as well to the Brockton Writers Series for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk to you all today about online events. I know that when it comes to book promotion, it is a really big part of how authors can promote their books. And so what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about how to, make the most out of your online events, not so much, and kind of, I guess, shift the way that authors might think about online events. Because I think that what a lot of people have been doing is approaching digital events the same way that they would a regular reading or a regular speaking event, but really they're kind of completely different things. We're finding as publishers now that whereas a physical event is very much like a sales opportunity, you can draw a straight line between the event and the book sales that come from it, and that line usually is like from the stage to the cash register. But now it's very much that online events are more of a promotion tool than they are a sales tool. The difference being that you're not really going to get as many direct book sales out of it, but it's just kind of another opportunity to get your book in front of as many eyes as possible. So that's what I want to talk about today, is how to get as many people as possible at your events, as many eyes at your events, and how to maximize that as an opportunity to just make your book known. So I'm going to do that in 5 steps. I have 5 tips that will kind of go before, during, and after the event, and the ways that you can, things that you can do to, again, just attract as many people and as many eyes as possible. So my first tip is, before the event, you want to choose your venue wisely, or choose your platform wisely. I know that a lot of people, like, we call it zoomed out because so many of these events are being hosted on Zoom. But as an author and as somebody who is probably going to be, planning this event yourself largely, Zoom isn't the only platform. It's not the only tool that you can use to promote the event. You want to think a lot about the best platform to reach your best audience, and also to fit the event that you want to have. So that very well might be Zoom. If you're thinking about doing a webinar or something that's a little bit, that kind of gives you the opportunity to interact a little bit more with people with the Q&A function, there are polling functions, there are all of these different sort of features to Zoom that make it a little bit more interactive, then that might be the right platform for you. But maybe you have more followers on Facebook. Like, there's no problem at all with hosting your event on Facebook, and there are pros and cons to that too. YouTube is another option because it's very much public and anybody can see it, and also your video will like live on YouTube after that. Or Instagram. I feel like a lot of authors don't think of Instagram as a digital events platform, but I personally love it and I recommend it to a lot of my authors, just because you literally have an audience of people. All of your followers are automatically people who very well might see the event. It's like at the top of their screen. They can just jump in and jump out. They can comment. It's very interactive. So I really like using Instagram for digital events. So these are just a few of the options that you have. And you really, again, want to tailor the platform to the event that you have and to the audience that you have. The second tip, and if I was going to like highlight and bold and extra large any tip, this would be it. It's number 2, partner up. This is one that I again recommend to so many of my authors. A solo reading in a bookstore, it's not solo. You have all of those people who are right there in front of you and they're kind of part of the experience, but kind of talking at a screen for 30 minutes or more can be exhausting, not just for you, but also for your audience. And also, like, if you remember school, having somebody talk at you for like an hour is just not the greatest experience. So I always recommend finding a partner, be it another author that you might know who can kind of is a friend, maybe somebody who writes books similar to yours, even if you're writing nonfiction, an expert in the field, literally anybody who can make it a little bit more engaging and kind of mix up the programming, but B, you're tapping into their audience too. You've basically doubled the reach of your event the minute you're adding somebody else on it, because they're going to be bringing from their audience and you're going to be bringing from yours. It also doesn't have to be just 2 people. You can, I don't want to say like invite as many as you want, but really think about how you can make it exciting by having more people involved. It just makes it more fun. And partners don't have to be other people necessarily. If you can find a bookstore or a festival or a library or any sort of event partner who can maybe lend a platform but also an audience, that's a huge, huge plus. And again, you're just reaching more people that way. So I really, really recommend all the time, anytime you can, partner up. Number 3 seems a little bit obvious, but I really don't think it is. So let's promote the event well. And I think a lot of people think that means just like posting about it on social media. And social media is super, super important, but that's not kind of the be all end all of it. There are places that you can post about your event to, again, just reach more people. So if you're Toronto based, which I'm guessing a lot of people are, Open Book, Now Magazine, there are a lot of different online venues that will let you post a digital event like it is like a regular event, and it's free. So definitely do that. And if you can find creative ways to promote the event, so not just like tweeting about it, but Maybe you want to do, if you have the means, doing like an online giveaway, saying, you know, send in a question. One thing I've done is, I've done with one of my authors is like, send in a question and you'll be entered to win a book, and you'll find out if you won by coming to the event. So that's a way to engage people and have more people sign up or come to your event. Just like be very creative about the ways that you are sort of making people aware that you're having this event, not just like posting about it and kind of leaving it there. You also want to be really consistent, not to the point where you're like hammering, like you're doing it daily and hammering people with it, but just consistent enough that people are reminded of it, especially closer to the date. So those are all the like before the event tips. Number 4 is during the event. Keep it fresh. So when it comes to programming your event, again, you don't want to just be talking at people for like a chunk of time. Having a moderator, having another person so that it's kind of a conversation just keeps people's attention for longer. That's not, and I feel like I shouldn't be like bad talking readings here. That's not what I mean to do at all. Readings are great, and they're a great way to get people kind of hooked onto your book. But again, you really just want to kind of change up the format in order to, because it attracts people firstly if it's a little bit different, and then it holds them and it keeps them there for the entirety of the event. I've seen people have musical guests, presentations, presenting videos during the event, and readings. These are all great ways to kind of mix it up, keep it fresh, and keep people engaged. Especially if you're planning on doing more than just one event, you don't want to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. So again, just be creative. Events are just another opportunity to be as creative as you can. And finally, tip number 5 is for after the event is over. Video is forever, record it. I think a lot of people don't do this as much. I think a lot of festivals do it, but solo authors maybe don't think about it as much, but you definitely want to record the event and keep using it afterwards as a means of promoting the book. So if you're using Zoom or streaming to like YouTube or Facebook, you can download the video and then post it again. So if your original event is on Zoom, download the video, post it to Facebook, post it to your YouTube page, and that's just, again, expanding your audience even more. If your event was on Instagram, a lot of people don't know this, but if you do an Instagram live, once you close it, in like the top left-hand corner, there is the option to download. You have to do it immediately because it never comes back once it's gone. I've made that mistake. But download it so that, again, you can either post it to like your Instagram TV, or you can save it, edit it, reuse it. It's just more content. And again, the point is to get your book in front of as many eyes as possible. And this is just another opportunity to get it in front of people. One thing I did want to talk about just kind of briefly is, and this is specifically for this tip, because I know that it's not really possible for everyone, but you definitely, if you can, make the video as accessible as possible. So YouTube and Facebook both have options to, I'm honestly not sure about like closed captioning as the video is going, like if it's live, but captioning, you can definitely caption the video afterwards, like post it, add closed captions. For Instagram, I think you'd have to edit it and add the subtitles. But again, if you want to reach as many people as possible, then you kind of have to, like, making it accessible, just think of it as you want to make your audience as broad as possible, and accessibility is a really important part of that. I know that we think of video as being kind of available to everybody, but it's really not. Like, there are people who might enjoy your book, who might really, respond well to your content, but if they can't access it, then it's a win for literally nobody. So I really, really recommend adding those accessibility elements. And again, I said it for the end because having somebody close caption or having like a sign language interpreter is not really available to everybody, but this is a very cheap and easy way that the average author can add accessibility elements to their events. So those are my 5 tips. I hope I wasn't talking too fast. And I did have one last. This is sort of a general tip. And one thing I really want everybody and authors, especially who are listening, to think about is to really don't be discouraged. There are so many online events happening right now. I know it can be really discouraging when only a handful of people show up. Maybe you're hoping for like 50, but that's not really what happens. It's not at all a bad thing. Again, video is very much forever. Reposting it, boosting your videos, those are like, you'll find your audience. A general publicity tip that I say to all of my authors is publishing a book is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So just because you don't have 5,000 people or sell 5,000 books or, you know, hit those big numbers right away, it's not the end of the world. Like, there are always going to be opportunities to put your book in front of people. People are always going to be buying your book. So don't let it get you down. Just keep on trucking, keep on moving forward. Yeah, so that's it. I hope that was helpful. Thank you again to the Brockton Writers Series for inviting me. This was fun.
Hi, Elham. We do have a question from Cyn. So I don't know if you can see it there, but I've posted it in the chat here. So I'm wondering if, and Cyn was wondering here, what is the most creative promotion idea you've heard of or tried?
Ooh, the most creative for a digital event, I think the one that I mentioned, like a giveaway beforehand, it's creative because it gets people engaging. And it wasn't my idea. I wish it was my idea. The author thought of it. But yeah, it gets, because Q&A is a really big part of a lot of these events. And again, if you're not having a huge turnout, it's one that like can kind of disappoint people because you're not getting tons of questions in the middle of the event. So in terms of that, I always recommend calling for questions beforehand on social media. It's a way to promote and also to get people engaging, and also just like write some questions for yourself. And if nobody can see the questions being asked, they won't know.
That's true.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And now, so this, I know we were talking about specific to digital, but have you seen any other things that could be taken from this digital promotion, this new way of promoting that we've all had to sort of adopt? Have you seen any new things come through that have been really inspiring or useful?
I think it's honestly the most inspiring thing to me has been how quickly a lot of people adopted digital, especially for bigger festivals, because like it's hard to turn a big ship, but they were so on the ball. And like, as a publicist, for me, the beginning of this sort of pandemic was incredibly disappointing because all the physical events that we had planned for our authors suddenly were gone. And I know how much authors depend on physical events. And so it was almost like crushing, but it lasted like a minute. Within like a week, people were catching up, adapting to digital. And I think what I love about it is that it's opening up such a much, much bigger audience. Whereas you had like very localized festivals or library series, now they're digital and they're open to all of Canada. And I think that those same, like, I don't think it's going to go away once we all start like going outside again. I'm really hoping that these, festivals and events see this as an opportunity to reach more people. And again, just make it accessible to more people. Because like, I'd love to go to Vancouver, but like, it's expensive. And so having that available online, it's like, I would 100% pay for it. And it's another opportunity to get really good content for people who love books.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Elham. I don't think we have any further questions for you yet. Do we here? I'm going to just, oh, Yes, we do. We
We
have
do.
some more
Yeah.
questions. I'm sorry about that. So first we have, should there be an attempt to capture contact info of people attending your events by registering people who attend, gathering their emails, things like that, so that you can promote to them afterward?
I think, yes, if you can. I didn't want to, like, I thought about including it as a tip here, but it's not necessarily a must. But I think if you know that this is an audience that you want to continue engaging with, absolutely. So a platform like Zoom will allow you to have registration, and kind of using that as like an opt-in so that you can send them maybe a follow-up email is always great to say, thank you so much for coming. By the way, here's the link if you want to buy my book. Again, you want to be careful. You don't want to like, again, just keep hammering people with promotions. But it's also good to just have that data to be able to see literally how many people registered. A good thing that I like to do is, so you have your Facebook event page, always have a Facebook event page. I forgot to mention that. And you can see how many people hit like going or interested. So comparing that against how many people actually registered against how many people showed up is it's just really good information to have, because you can it helps you gauge for next time what your turnout might look like. And then you can try maybe like another promotion opportunity, look at those numbers and kind of see how that compares. And it's data that you can use to kind of adapt your strategy going forward.
Okay, we have another question. This one from Dominic Parisien. Do you expect publishers and authors will maintain video events in the future, even if it's only recording the live event, like once we're back into doing things in live action again, in 3D?
I hope so. I think it's again incredibly valuable, and I know that there are some festivals that do that, and they will like make it available at least for a year until the next one. I really hope that they will. I think, like, I'm pretty sure there are some who aren't even like recording the live streams that they're doing now. But I think the smart ones will. Okay. No shade to anybody, but I think the smart ones will.
Noted. And wonderful Jen Albert is wondering if you have any more tips on increasing book sales after, during, and or because of online events. Always getting those sales up.
I know, that's a really tough one. Again, like, it's not just like for me in my personal experience. Everybody that I've talked to, festivals, librarians, everyone has said, like, there's no real correlation. Like, you do see the book sales, but it's much lower than what you would normally at a physical event. I don't think there's any like direct way to say for sure this is how you get more people to buy the book. That's why I wanted to frame this as just like a promotion opportunity, the same way that like if you bought up a TTC ad, there's literally no way to correlate book sales to that ad. You don't know how many people are going to see it necessarily. You don't know if they're going to like stop off and go to the bookstore, but it's just, you're literally doing it so that people will see that you have a book and that they might become interested and they might then go and buy the book. We always say that it used to be 3 times, now it's 7. Like, somebody has to see your product 7 times before they will actually go out and buy it. So yeah, this is just like one of those 7. Does that make sense? I hope that was helpful. Yeah, I don't want to discourage anyone and say like, you're never going to sell books if you do these events. But yeah, that's just kind of the difficult reality of what COVID has done to book sales.
Yeah, I know it's made it challenging on all of us. And also I think it has to do with people's purchasing power right now too. Maybe that is also factored into it as well. So hopefully that all changes for all of us for the better soon.
Yeah, and people are buying, like, they are buying books. We just can't say that like an event will make people buy books. Oh, but have a link. Sorry, this just occurred to me. Always have a link in the description for your event. Always, like, in your opening and closing, just make sure that you say to people the book is available. Here's where you can buy it. Like, if it's on Indigo, any indie bookstores that you particularly love, Amazon, like, just make sure that people know that the book is available for sale. And if you can put the link in a description or in comments, literally anywhere, make sure that it's there so people can just click on it. Then at the very least, like, you're covering your bases.
Okay, we do have one more question for you, Elham. It's from Fereshteh, who will be reading tonight as well. I wonder if you can give advice on how to find a partner to someone to partner with. Well, one, like she says, she is an immigrant writer with minimum connections when she doesn't have a network. Is there a way to find people who are like you?
Writers are wonderful in terms of like building a community for themselves. So I think sometimes you might get involved in like Facebook groups or online communities, and that's a great way to kind of just like meet people organically, that if you decide you want to do an event, they're right there that you can reach out to and ask. I've also, honestly, in my experience, like people are so kind and so encouraging to other writers. So like I used to work on blurbs with my authors, and I would always say to them, like, who is your blue sky dream? Reach out to them, because they don't want to tear you down. They want to help you. They want you to be successful too. So I think that if there might be an author that you admire, that maybe has a book similar to yours, like I don't think that there's an issue in ever reaching out and saying like, hey, I have written this book, I'm doing this event, would you like to you know, pair up? This is what we can talk about. Like, also have your plan in place. Don't just say like, do you want to do an event with me? It looks better if you're kind of prepared and you can say, I want to do an event on this day. This is the subject that we're talking about. This is why I think we can have a good conversation about it. If you have a publisher, you can also ask them to do it on your behalf. So I have reached out to other publishers and said, hey, I have an author who's doing this book. I know that you're doing this book, you know, in the same season. Why don't we pair up and you know, work together on that? Because publishers also want opportunities like this to promote their books and authors. And you can also do it. They can also help you because sometimes within your publishing, like within your own publisher's list, there might be a book that's similar to yours or an author that, you know, would work nicely with you. And they can tell you that, and they can help you make that connection. Yeah, I hope that helps.
That's wonderful. Yes, thank you, Elham. That's really great. And I love the community building involved in gathering other like different publishers as well, and different writers, and especially ones that you've never met or really, really hope you could meet one day. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, thank you very much, Elham. And on the note of making that money, usually at this point, we would hand around a pitcher for Pay What You Can donations to help support Brockton and our writers. But we can't pass you a pitcher through the screen. So instead, we've set up a PayPal account. So I'm going to post it in the chat. And if you have a couple bucks to spare, it would be great if you could go to that link and donate to Brockton Writers so we can keep delivering you this great literary content. So now on to our readers. In terms of and also relating back to what Elham was saying for accessibility, I will be posting a link to the text for the readers also in the chat so that if you need it for accessibility, you can read along. So first up, we have Cyn Rozeboom, who has worked in the art sector for over 30 years as a fundraiser, communication specialist, artist, and administrator. In her current role as executive director of Tangled Art Plus Disability, she delights in working with her team to subvert the status quo with joy and love, which is beautiful.
On to me? All right, hi. Yes, I'm Cyn. Thank you so much to the Brockton Reading Series and Ephemera for allowing me to be here. What I was originally going to present is a little bit different, given that I had to zip out to Edmonton for family reasons. I'm going to give you two pieces. The first one is a triptych, and well, it's inspired from having to be out here, actually. So on that note, this piece is, I'm calling it 3 Generations of Poets, and it's a bit of a multimedia extravaganza. Oh, no, I need screen sharing. Jen. Just a moment. Oh, I need to, bit of a problem. Okay, I guess I can do them in order. I just, for this one, I need to share my computer screen, which I'm not able to do right now. Oh no. All right, I'm going to start with the second poem. And hopefully by the time I get around to the other one, hopefully that could be figured out. So the second poem, now the first, is called Buoyant. And what's that here? All right, Buoyant. I have always been drawn to the dividing line, the site of negotiation between two states. Introvert, extrovert, idealist, realist, masculine, feminine, aloft, submerged. In the air, where I'm supposed to belong, this anemic thinness mocks my sloppy, obvious flesh with its refusal to push back. I need to contain through force of will this enormity that presses against my skin. I'm too solid, sickeningly material. My body yearns to return to the messy stew of original chemistry. I get so tired of holding it all in. When I dream of flying, I swim through the air. Always butterfly, oddly the stroke with the most fragile name, yet demanding the most raw power. I'm always drawn to the divide. Dominant, submissive, optimist, depressive. Underwater, I can relax, reassured by the element's utter disinterest. Even in a pool, a timid, tamed version of an ocean, a domesticated beast imposing its power unthinkingly, unflinchingly, knowing my outlines, tolerating my existence so long as I know my place. The pressure upon me, a constant reminder, I am borrowing this space. When I swim, I search for patterns, currents of least resistance I can slip into, laced with holds that allow themselves to be pushed against, to assert my essence just enough to move as fast and smoothly as I can. Any wasted power laughed at in splashes. Cycling around the center, reacting, instigating, diving beyond the line, pushed back in equal measure to my deviations. For the depths will not fully accept me so long as I cling to oxygen. To float is to be reminded and rejected, water's reminder. You do not belong here. You do not belong. Propelled towards the place that is neither here nor there, the meniscus, the skin of division. Not even a thing of its own, defined by the place that is one thing and then another. And yet that line has an integrity of a sort, an agency, subtle yet spread wide, a landscape between states that can hold some, but just some, tension before bursting. Am I being pushed out of the water? Or am I being held down by the air? And that was buoyant. I'm going to now see, I can't do the second one without screen sharing. Okay. Okay. Well, there's two pieces. Can I introduce them? Okay, well, you play the first one, then I go and then play the third one, the second one. So this piece is 3 generations of poets, and the first one is Virginia.
Oh shoot, the North Star blew up and I missed it.
Run!
There was a song within my heart I wish to sing before we part, a song of joy and love and care, to share with you what still we dare to love and live on this green earth, where sparrows play and mothers birth. Through all our hours, all our days, we worked and toiled to find ourselves in hands of soil. For in these things we came to know why we are here. It came so slow, to run and jump and then sit still, to feel ourselves until some hurt called forth a sadness within. All was not right, and so was sin. We could then see, what is this me? That we are they and they are we.
Thank you. Number 2 is Cyn, or Cynthia. The space between. I imagine the aching, vacuous emptiness of space, in which are strewn enormous entities, flaming, frozen, teeming, separated by distance and time, perhaps colliding once in a neon and then with explosive consequences, so far from one another as to really only be surmised. Pinprick twinkles, the tiniest promise of company, flickers of hope, winking from the boundless dark. I imagine atoms and their component parts, navigating around each other blindly in infinitesimal expanse, tiny flecks of charged particles not meant to occupy the same space at the same time, their movements influenced by unseen connections to others, which, though felt, are rarely, if ever, encountered. And when they are, with explosive consequences. I feel the loneliness of being something in the context of nothing, or perhaps simply not something, from the point of view of this life, singular, overwhelming, consumptive, from where I can only imagine others, though I see them twinkling from across the great divide, the impossible distance that separates I from I, gravitating around each other in ionic dance, our influence felt, though not always understood, always alone, though perhaps, once in an age, careening unexpectedly at each other through the space between to glance off each other, collide, if only for a moment, with explosive consequences. Number 3 is Tegan.
Oh shoot, the North Star blew up and I missed it. Zap! Did you see it? It blew up.
That's the
with
third
a handful
video.
of strings thrown across a stage play, leaving specks of amber and a breadcrumb trail behind it. It didn't mean much, just blurred into nothing like a ghost. Darn, and this was my moment. Every other time wisps sit in their bundles with VIP tickets to it all. And with my head mossed up from a fish tank, sparkling remnants fall like angels coming to earth, giving dreams to all that witnessed. I suppose it wasn't for me.
That's it. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I'm really happy and pleased to be with all you other talented human beings.
Thank you so much, Cyn. That was really magical. And wonderful that we had video, and that was really neat to see the generations. Next we have up Fereshteh Molavi. Born in Tehran in 1953, Fereshte Molavi lived and worked there until 1998 when she immigrated to Canada. She worked and taught at Yale University, University of Toronto, York University, and Seneca College. A fellow at Massey College and a writer in residence at George Brown College, Molavi has published many works of fiction and nonfiction in Persian, in Iran, and in Europe. She has been the recipient of awards for novel and for translation. Her most recent novel, 30 Shadow Birds, was published by Inanna Publications in 2019. She lives in Toronto. Welcome, Fereshteh.
Thank you. Do you hear me? Okay. Thank you again. I would like to thank Brockton's reading series and also Ephemera and everybody who's involved in this effort. I really appreciate it. I would like to read an excerpt from this book. I don't know if you see the book. It actually came out a bit before the pandemic. So anyway, I'm glad to have this opportunity. This is actually my fifth novel overall, and my first novel written in English. The protagonist of the novel is a single mom in her midlife, and she's an architect, but in Toronto she's actually doing several part-time jobs, including ESL teacher. So what I'm reading actually is the piece that she's driving on Yonge Street, and she's recalling one of her former employers. At the red light on Davisville, Yalda, an apple core between her teeth, enjoys the amusing variation of faces and figures, shapes, and colors passing at the pedestrian crossing. In the middle of the human wave moving in front of her eyes, she detects something familiar, an elephantine head on top of a mouse-like body with panda eyes and gelled jet black hair directed upward like a hoopoe's crest. Dr. Ahmadi, Yalda says under her breath, and the apple core falls to the floor. She bends to grab the core and, straightening her back, bangs her temple on the edge of the sun visor. Okay, I got punished by the invisible hand of heaven, she mumbles. She remembers that the man's name is Dr. Ahmadi, which means admirable, not Ahmadi, which means idiot. He's a genius, he's not stupid, she says, this time aloud, resentful. From the first moment of her first visit with him, Yalda felt an urge to call him Ahmadi instead of Ahmadi. Was this an overt bias, the wisdom of first impression, or just for the pun? Clearly, she never called him by that name outright, even when they quarreled. On the morning of her fourth day at work, when she was sent to the freezer to get something, she repeated that name 4 times under her breath, shivering and wiping tears off her frozen cheeks. On the afternoon of the 4th day, she learned that Mrs. Ahmadi, his wife, had ended the first job Yalda had found after 4 months of hunting for work. Yalda was glad she hadn't missed the opportunity to take revenge on Mrs. Ahmadi's husband earlier that day by calling him by the name that suited him most. Somebody behind her honks his horn. She looks into the rearview mirror, steps on the gas, and waves an apology. She allows herself to think about the man who rose above the human current for a minute and then disappeared, like a scum on running water. But a scum, like scars, never go away. One of her college students, an architect back home and a kitchen helper in Toronto, said this to her once. As the student described her humiliating working conditions, She tried to hide her scarred hands under her armpits. The pain was obvious in her broken voice. Yalda looks at her own hands resting on the steering wheel. No scars, no traces, not on the skin, not on the surface. Down there, beneath the skin, maybe in the folds and grooves of her brain's gray matter, she hides all the scars, all the scum. It was not Dr. Ahmadi's disproportionate body or the oddity of his facial features that gave Yalda a bad impression of him. It was his attitude. It swelled like a balloon in the course of the 4 days she worked for the Ahmadis in the bakery cafe franchise, and eventually burst when, after one final insult about her many failures, her anger and humiliation reached a boiling point and she broke down into tears. Missing a yellow light, Yalda slams on the brakes to stop at the red. Another failure, she thinks. The last straw was when he had pointed out her inability to toast the bagel for a condescending customer. No wonder Ahmadi deserves to be called Ahmadi. She chides aloud as she recalls the incident. She tries to forget the way he looked at her, not only during that thorny discussion, but also when he spied on her to make sure she was doing her job. Yalda notices a fluffy chocolate-colored puppy looking at her through the window of a flashy car. The smile comes to her lips, but quickly vanishes when the dog begins to bark aggressively. Her mind goes back to the man who could be demoted from admirable to idiot just by a simple change of D to Q. Dr. Ahmadi, who used to be a university professor in Iran, was unhappy with his wife's decision to hire her because he considered Yalda overqualified. When Mrs. Ahmadi introduced her and mentioned Yalda had been an architect, the smug grin appeared on his face. From day one, he looked down on her. He wanted it to be clear that she was no more than a help unwanted newcomer with no Canadian experience, not quick enough to comprehend the customer's mumbled orders, not savvy enough to know how to make and serve breakfast, salad, soup, and sandwiches, not smart enough to interact with customers. Go to hell, Dr. Ahmadi. You made me lose my confidence, Yalda mutters. Yet she has to admit that this is not the root of her anger. The light turns green. It's time, perhaps Yalda thinks, to look beneath the surface. What vexed her was that he was right. Despite what she claimed, she had zero talent as a waitress. More than that, she was reluctant to cater to stomachs, either hers or those of others. The only exception was her little bird's stomach. Other girls, and even the chef, that bulky Slav with sweat flowing off his red chubby face, knew that Mrs. Ahmadi was the real boss, and they always called her Madame. In reply to the non-stop orders of her husband, though, they would say, yes, boss, no, boss, okay, boss. The Ethiopian girl who was supposed to train Yalda used to whisper, he's a bossy boss, and they would both titter. Yalda recalls, it's not that easy to be a simple laborer, you know, Mrs. Ahmadi insisted. I do my best to learn how to do the job. As a single mom, I am familiar with making sandwiches, Yalda said with a grin. I'm concerned about whether others will accept you, Mrs. Ahmadi put her cards on the table. Nevertheless, you can try it for a few days and we'll see if it works for you and for us. As it turned out, it didn't. When she handed the bagel and cream cheese to her first customer, a white-faced, blue-eyed guy in a well-tailored suit, she noticed a frown between his eyebrows. He didn't say anything though. During the break, her Ethiopian colleague mentioned that the gentleman didn't like his bagel to be too crunchy. The customer hadn't told her about his preference. She resisted the urge to defend herself. Instead, she swallowed what felt like too much saliva in her mouth. Later, she got another sign. The boss, not the real boss, but the bossy boss, wanted to see her on her lunch break. When she went to his office, she was prepared to accept the blame and apologize. But not only did he lecture her about customer service, he also yelled at and threatened her. He definitely crossed the line. Recalling the meeting, Yalda questions whether the volume of his voice was high enough to be called yelling. His tone had been accusatory, decisive, and harsh. Most likely, it was his look that had been so offensive to her. While listening to him, she had felt all the pressure and stress of the 4-day learning process. She had had to learn so much in so little time, the names of different breads, pastries, cheeses, drinks, soups, salads, sauces, etc., the types of sandwiches, the ways of wrapping, the sort of smiles she could practice on customers, and on and on. The worst was the moment just before the customer ordered. What if she couldn't understand what they meant? For 3 nights, she'd suffered from the same nightmare. One by one, the customers came to her, stood in front of her, fixed their eyes on her, opened their mouths, and showed her all their speech organs. Teeth, tongue, alveolar ridge, hard palate, velum, uvula, and glottis, without uttering a word or even producing a sound. Dr. Ahmadi's head floated above them, a hoopoe's fan-like crest sitting on top of his head like a crown, opened and closed non-stop while his mouth spewed out words, sounds, and saliva. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very evocative. The saliva, I love it. Next up, we have Cassidy McFadzean. Cassidy McFadzean is the author of 2 books of poetry, Hacker Packer. That is a lot of fun to say, Hacker Packer. McClellan Stewart 2015, which won 2 Saskatchewan Book Awards and was a finalist for the Gerald Lampert Memorial Award. And Drolleries, M&S 2019, a finalist for the Raymond Schuster Award. She lives in Toronto. And if you'll take it away, Cassidy, I will share your text with the screen for the link to your text in the comments for accessibility.
Great, thank you so much. And thanks to Brockton for having me and Ephemera for facilitating the YouTube. So I'm just going to read a few poems from my new book, Drolleries. I'll begin with this poem called Mercury. I saw a stream of silver leave your mouth, he said, teasing the wisp of mercury, a lizard's tail, out of me. When Hermes hung retrograde, we wandered the aisles, carrying mandrake, nightshade, canned half-moon hearts of palm. It was the eve of another news anchor's son's fentanyl death. Climbing a mountain for no peak, we wanted to numb ourselves for the fun of it, little dogs gnawing at scraps of meat. Was that when you entered? Turning away invites you in, your hand between my thighs, feeling for an opening. This next poem I'll read is called The Gallery of Gems, and it's inspired by the ROM in Toronto. As someone who's new to Toronto, it was kind of a thrill to explore the museums when I first came here. Unfortunately, with COVID, I haven't been in a museum for a while, but this is maybe my ode to that wonderful room at the ROM. A mouse scratches its way through my head, clawing deeper each time I blink my eyes. Alone in the museum, I buy a gold leaf laurel necklace, direct a woman to ancient Greece. A wall of geodes appears as a doorway I enter, cavities lined with amethyst, the sharp edges of my brain. When the subway swerves around the junction, it captures the city as a closing aperture in an iPhone's reflection. A woman teaches her son to say garbage, repeat after me. I turn away, I can't eat, I have a weakness in me that attracts those who are weak. Ice crystallizes on the window, tiny trees. So my book came out about a year and a half ago, and I remember the evening of my launch was when we first had the conversation about reading at Brockton. So it's such a thrill that a year and a half later, it finally came to fruition. Long awaited, long anticipated. This poem is called To Find a Ghost Forest. Search first for traces of charcoal blackening the pathway, trees felled for fuel where livestock once grazed. Unearth clues obscured in old maps and estate records, specters of shadow woods archived in the king's doomsday. The phantoms cling to honeysuckle, holly, common cow wheat, haunting hacked off limbs of coppice trees. Bluebells mark woodland turned to pasture, a ring of hanging heads announcing the forest's neat graves. Maybe a fall-themed poem, autumn, maybe a little spooky. So I am originally from Regina, Saskatchewan, so I thought I would also read a poem kind of evoking my mindset when I was living there and some of the I guess landscape of Regina, the urban and rural combo. And this poem is also inspired by tarot cards, which I was really into when I was writing this book, but not so much lately. Maybe giving it up to COVID or something, the lack of control. 4 of Cups. My arm bruised where the nurse drew 4 vials of blood. It was a prick to see if I pour out normally or if my mutant genes coagulate. Patterns blur, my knuckles against carpet at 1 a.m. The next morning, waiting for the train carrying massive green tubes to inch forward, then reverse, move forward again. In this way, segments of the Keystone XL pipeline clear the intersection. Peering through the fetal assessment unit's 2nd-story window, I watch a pigeon regurgitating crop milk into her fledgling's gape. One bill fits within the other, a keratin speculum. Inside the examination room, the specialist's teardropped window screen resembles interconnected ovaries. We cover up so pedestrians can't see our naked bodies on the bed's off-white wrinkled sheet. I dress and leave, and it finds us again outside the casino, the train's waiting tunnel, endless and green. I have a shout out to the Casino Regina in that poem, one of the tourist attractions. Another Saskatchewan poem. I guess, I haven't been home since my book came out, so in quite a while. So maybe I'm a little nostalgic for Saskatchewan now. This poem is called Last Walk. Tired of wandering the same prairie roads outside the city, tired of parking on the same patch of flattened grass beside the trail marker, tired of climbing over the barbed wire, tired of waiting for trucks to pass before crossing the dirt highway, tired of brushing ticks off the fabric of tucked socks, plucking not yet swollen abdomens, tired of descending into the branches, tired of finding a way, tired of feeling limbs snack back as I follow you toward a path, tired of reading the map, tired of squishing purple berries between index finger and thumb, tired of feeling numb, tired of swatting flies, tired of saying, I'm thirsty, asking for a drink of water from the bottle you carry, tired of deciding how much farther to go, tired of taking the same tired photo, tired of rusted tractors parked in a more or less straight line, tired of being tied to the grid superimposed on the terrain, tired of crouching beside a hole in the ground, waiting for a glimpse of something alive before turning away. List poems can be fun. Just seeing how much time I have. So I'll just read a couple more. This poem is called Saturn Return. There's not a title poem in the collection Drolleries, but there are these amazing drawings of Saturn, which I'm not sure you can see. So I tried to kind of intertwine them in the book as well. Saturn Return. Before carving reindeer, walrus tusks, before horses painted on cave walls, all most early humans did was fashion axe heads from hunks of chalcedony, jasper, and flint, cryptocrystalline, quarried and hauled to the carving site. We worked obsessively, breaking blocks of basalt into hammerstones in teardrop shapes, beating rock against rock, lithic flakes falling like snow, layering skin with ash. Was it ritual, pragmatic, a nervous tick? One of us strayed from the carving site. Another pulled a clamshell in two and found an iridescent whirl, not unlike the wash of green when we gazed at the night sky. I wanted to hold him like a brother when I saw him sleeping in the loam, but flattened to the bog he appeared so lonely. Were we all this alone? It was the sky that called us forward, to depart our planet's terrarium to celestial spheres. The stars that lent us these atoms would take our flicker of energy within. We'd be calmed in our coming home, like holding a slab of rock perfectly fitted to our hand's flesh and striking stone. So I'll just read one last poem with a big thank you to the organizers and my fellow readers and the presenter. I feel like I got a lot of tips about how to do an online presentation if I do one again. So my last poem will be called Blanket Creek. The corpse flowers are late this year, slow to uncurl their waxy stems, heads lobbing under the weight of sleep, underground in their winter graves. Now that I hear the trees speaking, it's with reverence I return. Lay me down on the cedar's fur, magnified on skin, little water bear. The tree's burl is its bullocks, threads of moss its pubic hair. The ferns sway as they fornicate, the tardigrades survive the war. I miss the embryotic ghosts. I let you go ahead of me. I deemed your passage swift. There were flickers of happiness. I have worn my father's clothing. I have willed our oaths reversed. It's a narrow tree-lined path, and at the end of it, a burst. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassidy. That was beautiful. Next up, we have Brian Francis. Brian Francis's most recent work, Box 4901, premiered at Buddies in Bad Times Theatre in 2020 to sold-out audiences. His YA novel, Break in Case of Emergency, was a finalist for the 2019 Governor General's Literary Awards. His previous novels are Natural Order and Fruit. The book version of 4901 will be published by McClelland and Stewart in 2021. Brian, welcome.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. And the nice thing about coming on at the end is that I've gotten to enjoy so many wonderful readings. So it's been a pleasure being part of today, or this evening, I guess it is. So I'm going to read an excerpt for you today from my book, Breaking Case of Emergency. The book is a YA book, and it takes place in 1992. And I remember reading a review from a YA reader who said, well, since this takes place in 1992, I guess this could be considered historical fiction. And I died a little bit inside because I thought 1992 wasn't that long ago, was it? But I guess that's generations. Anyway, so 1992, depending on when you were born, could be considered historical fiction. So the book is about a 15-year-old girl named Toby Goodman. Toby has had her share of challenges. Her mother died by suicide when Toby was only 10 years old, and she never knew her father. And Toby's convinced that she's destined to follow in similar footsteps as her mother. She's living on a dairy farm with her grandmother and grandfather, and she just is feeling very lost and feeling that she has no value in the world. And so she starts to make plans, as I said, to follow a similar path as her mother. But before she's able to do anything, she's informed that her long lost father is finally returning home. And she finds out that not only is her long lost father gay, but he's also a female impersonator. And so he comes, he's a hot mess. He's just not a good parent figure at all. But they manage to find some sort of common ground between the two of them. And for me, the book is about forgiveness and learning to forgive the people around you and the people that you love, but also learning to forgive yourself, which I think is a very important skill that all of us maybe don't excel at as well as we should. So anyway, I never know where to start reading from a novel because it's like you start from the beginning, you have to explain everything leading up to it. You start at the end and then you ruin the surprise or whatever at the ending for everybody. So I'm just going to start from the beginning. So I'm just going to read the opening pages from Breaking Case of Emergency. So this is told in the voice of 15-year-old Toby Goodman. The day I lost my mom, I turned left instead of right. If I had listened to her instructions, if I had turned right, she would still be here. That morning, I knew something was wrong. While I was eating my breakfast, my mom said she wasn't going to work. The women of Tilden and their fat feet can wait. She pulled her frayed pink robe tighter around her. I am unwell. I looked down at my bowl of Cheerios. My mom didn't have the sniffles or a fever. She didn't have a headache or a sore throat, but I knew what she meant. There was a storm brewing inside her head, inside the walls of our two-bedroom apartment. My school wasn't far from where we lived, so I told my mom that she didn't need to pick me up at the end of the day like she always did. It would be easier for both of us. I can walk home with Trisha, I said. What if Trisha isn't at school today, she asked. Then I can walk home on my own. I'm 10 now. That's old enough. This felt like both a lie and the truth. Maybe you are, my mom said, but she wasn't looking at me. Instead, she was studying Henry, our goldfish, who kept rising up and diving down over and over again. Don't stop, Toby. Come straight home, or I'll worry. Okay, I said. I won't stop. But when the end of the day came, I didn't say anything to Trisha about walking home. I slipped my arms through the straps of my backpack and pretended it was just another day. Do you want to come over this weekend? Trisha asked as we walked out. My mom wants to teach me how to knit, but if you come, I'll say you're allergic to yarn. I don't think I can, I said. I'm supposed to visit my grandparents. Did I tell you my grandmother had her vagina taken out when she turned 60? Yes, I said. Sometimes it felt like Trisha said these kinds of things just to shock me, or maybe to shock herself. Maybe I was easier to shock back then. Mike says they took it out through her belly button, Trisha said. But have you ever heard of anything so stupid? And how would he know? He doesn't have a vagina. I said goodbye to Trisha at the edge of the schoolyard, and then I walked towards the parking lot like I did every day, pretending to look for my mom's silver car and her blank face staring out from the windshield. I walked through the parking lot and kept going in the direction of our apartment. When I got to the corner of Kathleen and East, I should have turned right and gone down Kathleen, which would have led to my apartment building, to my front door, to my mom. But I didn't turn right. Instead, I stopped and looked down our street. It was October, and the branches were letting go of their leaves. They tumbled through the air like hopeless birds. I wanted to forget, even for a moment, about my life, just for one day. So I swung my body around and started to walk down East Street. I went to Greer's, a variety store in a plaza that had a drugstore where my mom would pick up her medication, and a bank and a restaurant called the Horse's Feather that no one ever seemed to eat at except old people and confirmed bachelors, as my mom would say. Halloween was around the corner and Greer's went all out. The air smelled like wax teeth and makeup. There were vinyl vampire capes with cardboard collars and foam clown noses and pieces of rubber made to look like scars and open wounds. Costumes hung from the ceiling like bodies with no bones. There were masks, too, staring back from their hollowed out eyes, small slits between spray painted lips so that a person could breathe. I had wanted to be a gypsy that year. I had a picture in my head of what I'd look like in my makeup and headscarf and big gold hoop earrings. My ears weren't pierced, but Tricia said we could take care of that with a safety pin and a candle. Why a candle? I asked. You hold the pin in the candle's flame to sterilize it, Tricia said. Safety first, Toby. Oh, and we'll need ice. Lots and lots of ice. But my mom had said no, that I was going to be a pirate because she saw it in a magazine and I could put Vaseline on my face and smear coffee grinds onto my cheeks. I'll even make you a hook out of a coat hanger and tinfoil, she said, as she sliced open a package of ground beef, as if that would change things. I didn't want to be a stupid pirate. I didn't want to put coffee on my face, and I didn't trust my mom to do a good job with the hook. But I also knew I couldn't say anything. If there was one thing I had to do every day, it was to make sure I didn't say or do anything that would upset my mom. When she got upset, when the dark thoughts started running around inside her head like angry squirrels, the entire world turned upside down. It was my job to keep things right side up. I wanted to be a gypsy that Halloween because I wanted to be beautiful that year. I wanted to see what was possible. I think a gypsy would be easier, I said, and you wouldn't have to waste all that coffee. My mom said she'd think about it and turned around to fry the ground beef. But the answer to me was already clear. So I went to Greer's to see if they had any girl pirate costumes. That's what I told myself anyway. But the real reason was that I didn't want to go home. I didn't know what my mom would be like when I got there, if the voices would have taken over. When that happened, they were the only voices my mom listened to. I took a Frankenstein mask down from its hook and tried it on. There was a hand mirror tied to a long string, and I held it up in front of me. The eyes looking back were still mine, but the face wasn't. It made me feel better to not be recognizable, to know that I could be someone else, someone besides Toby Goodman, the girl who lived in apartment 211 with her mom, Heather, and a goldfish named Henry, the girl who wanted to hide, even though she never could. Those masks aren't for trying on, the woman behind the counter said. That's how germs get spread, you know. I put the mask back on its hook and bought a pair of red wax lips. The woman put them into a paper bag and gave me my change. Don't eat the lips, she said. They'll constipate you. I said, okay, even though I'd never even think to eat wax. By the time I got home, my mom was dead. Thank you.
Oh, that was so great. As somebody who was also like, a queer preteen in 1992, it's not historical fiction for me. It's just very, very relatable. So, as a feature of Brockton Writers Series, we welcome your questions for our writers. In the interest of respecting our authors and their time, if you have comments or want to speak about your own work, please save that for later. You can contact them through their various social medias, or we can facilitate that. But do we have any questions in the comments right now? I don't see any, but I have questions. I always have questions. So, especially given this world that we're in right now, and we're all trying to get our names out there, do our writing, like focus on our writing, and also do the promotional work that comes as part of a writer, like what does success look like to you in the time of COVID? Like for all of you, this question for all of you, like what does it look like? Is success just getting the writing done? Is success being asked to come to these events? Like what is, how are you doing is my question, I guess.
Okay, can we have someone, I think Cyn, can you unmute yourself?
I can give a stab at that. I think perhaps I'm an exception to the group in that I'm not, my day job is not as an artist. I work primarily as an arts administrator, but I've been trying very consciously lately to try to use poetry, which is what I do for pleasure and I used to do more of, to bringing it into bureaucratic places and to use it in a way of subverting the way that we usually we administer art in this very dry bureaucratic way, and I don't think that's, I don't know why where we work in the arts. So success for me right now is when I actually effectively am able to take something and communicate something in a poetic way that might generally be expected to be a dry conversation or like a talk, or one of these days I would love to write a grant application that was just entirely like a long form poet. Of course I can't do that with anything that will get like anybody else's hopes crushed if it gets totally thrown out, but I just think it would be hilarious to actually have long form poetry as a funding request. So yeah, it's probably a little bit different than some of the other actual writers in the group here, but
I mean, I don't make a distinction between like actual and having a day job. Like I think there's very few writers who actually just live off their writing. That's my take from what I know. Fereshteh, Brian, Cassidy, do you have thoughts on this?
I know for myself, I think all of us should be proud of surviving at this time, like just living day to day and with all this uncertainty and the anxiety and the unknowing, like we're living through a pandemic, and this is the first time that anyone's been, well, not, and certainly not in history, but it certainly is, a pivotal moment. And I think if anything, it's nice to be able to keep up with the writing, because the writing for me, I know, is an escape, right? Like it's escape from reality. I don't need to be living in the real world right now as much as I can help it. I mean, it is what it is. So in some ways, the writing and the practice of writing and keep going on your writing is a way of survival. It's a way of maintaining some sense of order and structure sometimes in a world where it doesn't seem like there is a lot of order, or there seems to be a lot of uncertainty. So the same might be true for other writers, where it becomes your saving grace, right, to get you through very turbulent times. So yeah.
Fereshteh?
Yeah, Fereshteh can go.
A couple of words just in order to say something. The thing is that we all know about the dark side of the pandemic. And for me personally, as a senior, isolated outsider, I mean, I feel very pessimistic about the future of the world, and particularly for young generation. I mean, it's not just about the pandemic, it's all about the whole world with all problems and bad things happening in different parts of the world. However, this aside, personally, I try to find something positive in the situation. I'm not that much optimistic to think that we are learning, in fact, from historical lessons. However, I think that it is a moment to reflect on what we are really doing with the world, with the earth, and with our life. So in this way, actually, for me, I look at the COVID as kind of motive personally for me, in a way that I would say every day to myself that, okay, Fereshteh, you don't have a lot of time to do your writing, so get to work, get to work, get to work. And this really, because I'm working on a novel for a couple of years, and now the situation actually pushes me to finish it. So I think it is overall a good thing for me looking at the issue like that.
Yes, I think just to echo everyone who's spoken, I definitely agree. Survival, I mean, the world is literally on fire and literally on fire. So some days success for me is working on a piece I might be working on, but another day is just taking care of myself. Or, I mean, my book came out so long ago that I think what's really come to the surface is just the connections with my fellow poets. Just someone out of the blue might contact you that a poem has impacted them in some way, and that can really show you that your work is important or significant even when the world is like falling apart and on fire. So I think it just depends on the individual.
I think that's a really great point. I think people should make more of a practice of just like, tweeting at somebody like, I read your book and I loved it. I think that, like, I've had it happen a couple of times, like, hey, I read your story and it was great. I'm like, really, me? What? It makes your entire week. Emily, did you have any questions for?
I don't have any specific questions other than our usual. We can always count on this one to bring some interesting responses. So I'd like to ask everyone, and including you, Elham, I know that you're not, you don't necessarily consider yourself a writer in your faculties here tonight, but we are certainly very interested to hear your answer in this as well. So each of you, could you please let us know a great book you've read recently that you think our audiences would be interested in reading? Take with that what you will. So think about a book that you've read recently. I use that term loosely. that you think that our readers and writers and audience members will enjoy.
I've got one. I just finished reading, there's two books, but they're linked. The Parable of the Sower and The Parable of the Talents by Octavius Butler. Amazing and so appropriate for this time. Kind of dark, but also uplifting. Totally recommend it.
Yes. Who else has got one? Come on, readers are all readers, right?
I've actually only been reading fiction. For some reason, poetry just isn't working with my brain right now. So I really enjoyed Laura Vandenberg's I Hold the Wolf by the Ears, which is a collection of short stories that are kind of like contemporary fairy tales, really preternatural and pretty creepy. So I highly recommend that book.
Fantastic.
I've been on a bit of a horror novel kick. I don't know why. I just kind of go with it. You know, summer, for whatever reason, I just seem to really gravitate towards discovering a scary read. So one I recently read that was really good was called The Changeling. And I can't remember the author's name. I want to say his first name was Victor. It came out last year. He's an American author. But it's kind of a contemporary tale set in New York City, but there's a lot of kind of, I wouldn't call it a horror, but more like magical kind of landscape in a modern contemporary setting. And if you're looking for something that's kind of outside the realm of reality, it certainly is a good book to check out.
I found it. It's Victor Laval, Lavalle.
Yes.
And this is so my bag. I am reading that. Like clicking want to read right now.
I think you'll, it's a really good book. And it's kind of like, as I said, it's set in modern times, which you don't often sometimes see a lot with sort of the supernatural kind of horror genre. So I was happy to discover it, and it's a great book.
Fereshteh, do you have one?
I'm not very updated. However, I would like actually to mention two books. None of them are new. One is actually a book, The Outliers by Gladwell. I really like it. The reason why is actually I think it's very relevant to, at least for me, it is very relevant. Other than that, there is another book. Again, that book is not new. However, I read it actually last year, and I found it very compelling and impressive. And it is about, actually, the name of the book is The Boy in the Moon. I think everybody knows because the writer of this book is a famous, well-known journalist. The writer is Ian Brown, if I'm not mistaken. It is about actually the account of life with a disabled child. So, other than that, I obviously read so many different short stories, but I would like to actually to recommend these to anybody who hasn't read them before.
Thank you. That's great. And Elham, what have you got for us?
I've actually been in a really awful reading slump for the last year. But I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks. So one that really, really stuck with me, and that I had to go through my Goodreads to be like, what have I read in the last little while? But Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Dahiri is a really fantastic book. I really, really recommend it. It's all about how hair and the history of Black hair, like Black people's hair, has impacted racism and is actually at times more has had more of an impact on the way people are treated than skin color. And the funny thing for me is, like, some people can't tell, but I'm actually a Black woman myself. I'm very, like, wearing a hijab makes me a little bit ethnically ambiguous, but like if I were to take it off, like, you would kind of know. And so it was very much a learning experience for me about how a lot of my own attitudes towards myself and towards beauty and my self-esteem have been impacted by racism. It was really such an incredible book, and I highly recommend it. I'd also like to throw in, I haven't read The Changeling, but I love Victor Laval's The Ballad of Black Tom. Brian, if you haven't read it, pick it up tomorrow.
I will. Thank you. I just discovered him through this book, so thank you for that recommendation.
It is, like, that's a book that has become an instant favorite of mine. I love it so much.
Okay. Thank you for that book tip.
My pleasure. And thank you, everybody. I'd just like to say, like, everybody, thank you so much for sharing your work. I do write a bit myself, but have never had anything published. And so I just admire writers so much. Thank you.
Well, maybe we'll have to have you on as a reader one time soon.
Yeah, no.
We'll work up to it.
I'm already planning my next trip to Bacafina's Books. Thank you, everybody, for that was everybody, right, Emily? Everybody answered our question. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming with us today. We're pretty much right on time. And I wanted to say thank you to all of our readers for being with us today. Thank you to all of our volunteers. And as we've learned from Elham today, we need not just a Facebook volunteer, but also a videographer for when we go back to in person. So if you're a videographer and want to volunteer for Brockton, get in touch, or if you can manage our Facebook. Thank you so much to Jen and to Ephemera. As mentioned, Ephemera is hosting us because they have the technical know-how, and their next event is on Wednesday the 16th, next Wednesday, a week from today. They're Toronto's speculative fiction venue, and I love them dearly. Next Brockton is November 11th, 2020 with Jamie Tennant, Larry Bear, Joshua Ping, and Zoe S. Roy. Please keep an eye out for us to announce that, and it will probably be here as well on Ephemera's YouTube. Thank you, everybody.